The silence in space was broken only by the soft hum of the Kethnari science vessel Veltara as it moved through the debris field. Captain Zartek stood on the bridge, his large black eyes scanning the floating pieces of metal and plastic that had once been a proud colony ship. The wreckage stretched for miles in every direction, telling the story of violence and destruction that had happened here 3 years ago. "Another human vessel," said Science Officer Lindar, his thin fingers dancing across the control panel. "The ship records call it the New Horizon. It was carrying 5,000 colonists to the outer rim when raiders attacked it." Zarthek nodded slowly. The Kethanari had heard stories about humans, but they had never seen one alive. The stories were not pleasant ones. Other species whispered about the aggressive creatures from the third planet of a yellow star, beings who fought wars among themselves and conquered everything they touched. Most galactic species avoided human space entirely. "Any survivors?" Zartek asked, though he already knew the answer. 3 years in the vacuum of space left no room for hope. "The main computer is destroyed, but some secondary systems are still working," Lindar replied. "I am reading some intact sections deep in the ship. Perhaps we can salvage useful materials." The Velthara was a small research ship with a crew of 20 Kethnari. They made their living by salvaging abandoned vessels and trading the materials they found. It was honest work, and it kept them away from the dangerous parts of the galaxy where pirates and raiders hunted for easy prey. As they moved closer to the wreckage, Zartek could see the burn marks on the hull where weapons had torn through the metal. The New Horizon had been a massive ship, nearly 2 miles long, designed to carry thousands of people and all their belongings to a new world. Now it was just floating junk, another reminder of how cruel the galaxy could be. "Captain," called Communications Officer Neldash from her station, "I am detecting a power signature from inside the ship. Something is still running." Zarthek turned his attention to the readings. It was impossible. Nothing could survive 3 years without proper maintenance, especially not in a ship that had been gutted by raiders. Yet the sensors clearly showed a steady power draw coming from somewhere deep inside the wreckage. "Take us closer," he ordered, "but keep the shields up. I do not trust anything about this situation." The Velterra moved carefully through the debris field until they were next to the largest piece of the New Horizon. The section appeared to be part of the ship's central core, where the most important systems would have been located. Scorch marks covered the hull, but the metal itself was intact. "I am reading the power source," Lindar announced. "It appears to be coming from what the humans called their emergency cryo bay. The signature is very weak, but it is definitely active." Dr. Velnara looked up from her medical station. She was the ship's doctor and chief biologist, responsible for analyzing any biological materials they found during their salvage operations. "Cryo bay? You mean they have preserved specimens?" "Not specimens," Lindar said, his voice growing excited. "If I am reading this correctly, there is still one active cryopod running on emergency power. Captain, there might be a living human inside that wreckage." The bridge fell silent. A living human was something none of them had ever expected to find. The Kethanari were a peaceful species, standing barely 4 feet tall with delicate bones and gentle nature. They had evolved on a world with low gravity and no large predators. The idea of meeting one of the galaxy's most feared species face to face was both terrifying and fascinating. "Are you certain?" Zarthek asked. "The readings could be wrong. Maybe it is just a malfunctioning system." Lindar checked his instruments again. "The power draw is consistent with an active life support system. The cryopod is maintaining minimal function, but it will not last much longer. If there is someone inside, they will die within the next few hours when the power finally runs out." Zarthek found himself facing a difficult decision. The smart thing to do would be to salvage what they could and leave. Humans were dangerous. Unpredictable creatures who solved problems with violence. Every story he had heard about them involved death and destruction. But he was also a scientist, and the chance to make first contact with a new species was incredibly rare. "Dr. Velnara," he said finally, "can our medical bay support a human life form?" The doctor consulted her records. "Human biology is well documented. They breathe oxygen like we do, and their body temperature is similar to ours. Our medical systems should be able to keep one alive, assuming it survives the revival process. And if it does not want to be kept alive? Asked Security Chief Kelmore from his position near the bridge entrance. Humans are known for their aggressive behavior. What if it attacks us? Zarthek considered this. Kelmore was right to be concerned. The Kethanari had no real weapons aboard their ship beyond some basic stunning devices used for handling dangerous wildlife during their research missions. If a human decided to cause trouble, they would have very few options for stopping it. We will take precautions, he decided. Kelmore, have your security team ready with stunners. Dr. Velnara, prepare the medical bay for an unknown patient. We will need to monitor its vital signs carefully during the revival process. Captain, Neldash interrupted, I am receiving an automated distress signal from the cryopod. It is very faint, but the message is repeating in several languages. The human inside is requesting immediate assistance. That settled the matter for Zartek. No matter how dangerous humans might be, he could not ignore a distress call from a dying person. It went against everything the Kethnari believed about helping those in need. Prepare a boarding team, he ordered. We will extract the cryopod and bring it aboard. Lindar, I want you to download any information you can find about the human inside. Medical records, personal history, anything that might help us understand what we are dealing with. The next 2 hours were tense as the Kethanari boarding team carefully cut through the damaged hull of the New Horizon. The cryo bay was located deep inside the ship, protected by multiple layers of armor and redundant systems. It had been designed to keep the colonists safe during the worst possible disasters, and it had succeeded beyond its creator's wildest dreams. When they finally reached the cryopod, they found it covered in frost and surrounded by the bodies of humans who had not been lucky enough to reach safety in time. The sight was disturbing, even for the experienced salvage crew. The humans looked so much like the Kethanari in some ways, with 2 arms and 2 legs and a head in the right place, but they were much larger and more muscular than any Kethanari had ever been. The pod is stable, reported Engineer Telwyn over the radio. The human inside appears to be alive, but the power levels are critical. We need to move quickly. Using their ship's cargo handling equipment, they carefully extracted the cryopod and transported it to the Velthara's medical bay. Dr. Velnara immediately began connecting it to their ship's power systems while running diagnostic scans on the occupant. The human is male, she announced as the readings came in. Adult, approximately 32 years old based on the biological markers. Physical condition appears to be excellent, though there are signs of minor injuries that were treated before he entered cryosleep. Lindar had been busy downloading information from the New Horizons' damaged computers. His name is Jake Morrison, he reported. He was a construction foreman on the colonization project. According to his file, he was responsible for building the colony's infrastructure once they reached their destination. Sarthek studied the sleeping human through the transparent lid of the cryopod. Jake Morrison looked peaceful, unaware that his entire world had changed while he slept. His fellow colonists were dead, his mission was over, and he was about to wake up surrounded by aliens he had probably never imagined existed. Begin the revival process, Zarthek ordered, and everyone stay alert, we are about to make history. The revival process began with a soft hiss as the cryopod's systems slowly warmed Jake Morrison's body. Dr. Velnara watched the readings carefully, her large eyes fixed on the medical displays that showed his vital signs coming back to life. His heart rate was increasing, his brain activity was growing stronger, and his body temperature was rising toward normal levels. How long will this take? Captain Zarthek asked, positioning himself near the door where he could escape quickly, if needed. The other crew members had similar ideas, staying close to exits while trying to look like they were not afraid. The process cannot be rushed, Dr. Velnara replied. If we wake him too quickly, his brain could be damaged. The human body is more complex than ours in some ways. We must be patient. Security Chief Kelmore stood ready with his stunner, though he wondered if the small weapon would have any effect on a creature as large as the human. Jake Morrison was over 6 feet tall and weighed nearly twice as much as the biggest Kethnari. His muscles were clearly visible through his skin, even in his sleeping state. Look at his hands. whispered Engineer Telwyn. "They are huge. He could probably crush our bones without even trying." "Quiet," ordered Captain Zarthek. "We do not know what he can hear. The last thing we want is for him to wake up thinking we are enemies." The cryopod continued its work, filling the medical bay with gentle sounds and soft lights. Jake's eyelids began to flutter as his consciousness slowly returned. His fingers twitched, then his arms moved slightly. Dr. Velnara stepped back as his eyes opened for the first time in 3 years. Jake Morrison woke up confused and disoriented. The last thing he remembered was diving into the cryopod as alarms screamed throughout the new horizon. There had been explosions, smoke, and the terrible sounds of the ship being torn apart by enemy weapons. Now he found himself in a strange room surrounded by gray-skinned creatures with enormous black eyes. His first instinct was pure panic. These were not human faces looking down at him. The universal translator built into the ship's systems began working immediately, converting the aliens' clicking and whistling sounds into words he could understand, but that only made things worse. He was definitely not on a human ship anymore. Jake tried to sit up quickly, and his movement sent Dr. Velnara stumbling backward in surprise. She had not expected him to be so fast or so strong. The cryopod's lid opened completely, and Jake swung his legs over the side, his boots hitting the floor with a loud thud that seemed to shake the entire medical bay. "Please remain calm," Captain Zarthek said through the translator, his voice filled with nervous energy. "You are safe. We found you in the wreckage of your ship and brought you here to help you." But Jake was not listening to the words. His mind was focused on survival, and everything about this situation screamed danger. He was surrounded by unknown creatures in an unfamiliar place, and he had no idea how he had gotten there. His training in construction site safety had taught him to always be aware of potential threats, and right now everything looked like a threat. When he stood up to his full height, the aliens seemed to shrink back even further. The ceiling of the medical bay was just high enough for him to stand without hitting his head, but it felt cramped and confining. He could see fear in the large black eyes staring at him, which only made his own fear grow stronger. "Where am I?" he demanded, his voice deep and loud compared to the gentle sounds the aliens had been making. "What happened to my ship? Where are the other colonists?" The aliens exchanged glances, clearly communicating with each other in ways Jake could not understand. Dr. Velnara tried to approach him with a medical scanner, moving slowly and carefully like someone approaching a dangerous animal. But to Jake, the device in her hands looked like it could be a weapon. "Stay back," he warned, raising his hands in a defensive position. "Do not come any closer with that thing." Security Chief Kelmore saw the human's aggressive posture and decided to act. He stepped forward with his stunner drawn, not intending to use it, but hoping to show that the aliens were not helpless. It was exactly the wrong thing to do. Jake saw the weapon and reacted instantly. 3 years of sleep had not dulled his reflexes, and his body moved before his mind had time to think about what he was doing. He spun toward Kelmore and threw a defensive strike, the same kind of movement he had used in self-defense classes. Back on Earth, the punch was not meant to be a killing blow. Jake was simply trying to disable what he saw as an immediate threat. But the difference in their species' physical capabilities meant that his idea of a light defensive strike was devastating to the much smaller and more fragile Kethnari Kelmore. Flew backward across the medical bay like he had been hit by a speeding vehicle. His body slammed into the far wall with a sickening crack, and he collapsed to the floor without making a sound. His stunner clattered away across the metal deck, completely forgotten. The other aliens stared in shock. They had expected the human to be strong, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. Jake had moved faster than their eyes could follow, and the force of his strike had been enough to break bones and possibly kill their security chief. Jake himself was horrified by what he had done. He had only meant to defend himself, but the alien's small body had crumpled like paper. He backed against the wall, his hands raised in surrender, his face showing the terrible realization of what his strength could do to these fragile beings. I'm sorry," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I did not mean to hurt him that badly. I was just scared. Is he okay? Please tell me he is okay." Dr. Velnara rushed to Kelmore's side, her medical scanner finally being used for its intended purpose. The readings were not good. Several of his ribs were broken, his left arm was fractured in 2 places, and he had suffered a serious head injury. He was alive, but barely. "He needs immediate surgery," she announced, calling for her medical assistants. "Get him to the operating room now." Captain Zarthek watched his security chief being carried away, and then turned back to Jake. The human was still pressed against the wall, clearly struggling with guilt and confusion. His hands were shaking and there were tears in his eyes. "You said you were scared," Zarthek said carefully. "We understand fear. But you nearly killed one of my crew members with a single strike. How is that possible?" Jake tried to explain, but the words came out in a rush. "I do not know. I mean, I know I am strong, but not like this. On Earth, that would have just knocked someone down, maybe given them a bruise. I work construction, so I am used to physical labor, but I am not a fighter. I have never hurt anyone this badly before." The other aliens in the medical bay were keeping their distance now, clearly afraid of what the human might do next. Jake could see the fear in their eyes, and it made him feel sick to his stomach. These creatures had saved his life, and he had repaid them by nearly killing one of them. "Please," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I do not want to hurt anyone else. Just tell me what I need to do to help him, and I will do it. I will do whatever you want. Just please do not let him die because of me." Dr. Velnara's voice came over the ship's communication system from the operating room. "The surgery will take several hours. He has a chance to survive, but it will be difficult. His injuries are severe." Captain Zarthek made a decision that would change everything. Instead of having his crew subdue the human or lock him away, he chose to trust Jake's obvious remorse and desire to help. "Human Jake Morrison," he said formally, "we rescued you because you needed help. Now one of our people needs help because of what happened here. If you truly want to make this right, then you will help us understand what you are and how we can prevent this from happening again." Jake nodded eagerly. "Yes, anything. I will tell you whatever you want to know. I just want to help." And so began the strangest first contact in galactic history, with a human construction worker trying to explain to a ship full of terrified aliens why he was so much stronger than anything they had ever encountered before. The next few hours were the longest in Jake Morrison's life. He sat in the corner of the medical bay, making himself as small as possible while the Kethnari crew worked around him. They had given him a chair, but he was afraid to use it after, seeing how easily their furniture bent under his weight. Instead, he stayed on the floor with his back against the wall, trying not to move too much or make any sudden gestures. Captain Zarthek had stationed 2 crew members to watch him, but they kept their distance. Jake could see the fear in their large black eyes every time they looked at him. He wanted to tell them that he was not dangerous, that he would never hurt anyone on purpose, but he knew his words meant nothing after what had happened to Kelmore. Dr. Velnara came out of the operating room every hour to give updates on the security chief's condition. The news was not good. His ribs were healing, but slowly. His arm would need metal supports to work properly again. The head injury was the biggest concern because it was affecting his memory and speech. "Will he be okay?" Jake asked each time, and each time Dr. Velnara gave him the same answer. "We do not know yet. His body is fighting to heal itself, but the damage was severe. We have never treated injuries like this before." Jake buried his face in his hands. He had spent his whole life building things, creating homes and buildings that would last for generations. Now the first thing he had done after waking up was destroy someone's life. The guilt was eating him alive. Science Officer Lindar approached, him carefully, carrying a portable scanner and a data pad. He stayed well out of arm's reach, but his expression was more curious than afraid. "Human Jake," he said politely. "Captain Zarthek has asked me to learn more about your species. Would you be willing to answer some questions? It might help us understand what happened and prevent future accidents." Jake looked up, grateful for something to do besides worry about Kelmore. "Yes, of course, I will tell you anything you want to know." Lindar activated his scanner and began taking readings. "First, may I ask about your homeworld? What is it like?" Jake tried to think of how to explain Earth to beings who had never seen it. It is bigger than your ship, much bigger. The gravity is strong, about twice what you have here on your vessel. There are large animals that hunt smaller ones, and the weather can be very dangerous. Storms, earthquakes, floods, fires. We have to be strong just to survive. The science officer's eyes widened as he recorded the information. Twice our gravity? No wonder you are so much stronger than we are. Our world has very gentle conditions. The largest predator is no bigger than my hand, and we have no dangerous weather. That explains a lot, Jake said sadly. Where I come from, I am just an ordinary person. I work with my hands, lifting heavy things and building structures. Most humans could do what I do. We do not think of ourselves as particularly strong. Lindar's scanner was giving him readings that seemed impossible. According to these measurements, your bone density is 3 times greater than ours. Your muscle mass suggests you could lift objects weighing several hundred pounds. Your reflexes are faster than our equipment can accurately measure. Jake nodded. That sounds about right. On a construction site, we often have to move heavy beams and equipment. A few hundred pounds is not unusual for a good day's work, and we have to move quickly to avoid accidents. By the void, whispered Engineer Telwyn, who had been listening from across the room. He talks about lifting several hundred pounds like it is nothing. Our cargo mechs can barely handle that much weight. Captain Zarthek joined the conversation, his expression thoughtful. Jake, you said most humans are like you. How many of your people are there? On Earth? About 8 billion the last time I checked. The colony ship was carrying 5,000 people to start a new world, but there are hundreds of other colony ships traveling to different planets. Humans spread out across the galaxy pretty quickly once we figured out how to travel between stars. The aliens exchanged worried glances. 8 billion creatures as strong as Jake Morrison was a terrifying thought. If humans ever decided to become aggressive toward other species, there would be very little anyone could do to stop them. But we are not all fighters, Jake added quickly, seeing their concern. Most of us are farmers, teachers, doctors, engineers, artists. We build things and create things and try to make life better for everyone. Yes, we have soldiers and police to protect us from bad people, but most humans just want to live in peace, Doctor. Velnara emerged from the operating room again, this time with better news. Kelmore is stable. The surgery was successful and his vital signs are improving. He should make a full recovery, though it will take time. Jake felt a huge weight lift from his shoulders. Can I see him? I want to apologize. Not yet, the doctor replied. He is still unconscious, and his injuries are too serious for visitors, but he will live, and that is what matters. Jake nodded, grateful beyond words. He had been preparing himself for the possibility that he had killed someone, and the relief was overwhelming. Dr. Velnara, Captain Zarthek said, what can you tell us about human physiology? Are they as dangerous as they appear? The doctor consulted her readings. Their bodies are designed for a much harsher environment than ours. Everything about them is built for survival in difficult conditions. Their bones are thick and strong, their muscles are dense and powerful. Their nervous system reacts quickly to threats. They are not necessarily dangerous, but they are certainly formidable. It is like they evolved on a death world, Lindar commented. A planet where only the strongest and fastest could survive. Jake considered this. I suppose that is true in some ways. Earth has always been a challenging place to live. Natural disasters, dangerous animals, diseases, wars between different groups of humans. We had to become tough just to make it through each day. But that same toughness is what lets us explore space and build new worlds. And it is what let you survive 3 years in cryo sleep when everyone else on your ship died, Captain Zarthek observed. Your people are survivors. We try to be, Jake agreed. But we also try to help others survive too. That is why we were going to colonize new worlds, to give other humans a chance at a better life. And it is why I want to help you now, to make up for what I did to your friend. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent beeping from the ship's communication system. Communications Officer Neldash's voice came over the speakers, filled with alarm. Captain, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting a ship approaching our position. The signature matches Vraktar raiders. Jake saw the immediate change in the aliens' behavior. They became tense and frightened, moving quickly to their stations. Captain Zarthek's expression was grim as he headed toward the bridge. "What are Vraktar raiders?" Jake asked, but he could already guess from the crew's reaction that they were not friendly visitors. "Pirates," Lindar explained quickly. "They attack peaceful ships and steal everything valuable. They are much larger and stronger than we are, and they have powerful weapons. Our ship cannot fight them off." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Are they the ones who attacked my colony ship?" "Very likely," Captain Zarthek replied from the doorway. "The Vraktar control this sector of space. They prey on anyone who cannot defend themselves." Jake stood up slowly, his expression hardening. The guilt and confusion he had been feeling were replaced by something else entirely. These aliens had saved his life, and now they were in danger from the same creatures who had killed his friends and destroyed his future. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Maybe an hour before they reach us," Neldash reported. "They are demanding that we surrender our cargo and any salvage we have collected. They specifically mentioned the unusual biological specimen they detected." Jake realized they were talking about him. The raiders wanted to capture him, probably to sell him to someone who collected rare creatures. The thought made him angry, but more than that, it made him determined. "Captain," he said quietly, "I think it is time I showed you what humans can really do when someone threatens their friends." Captain Zarthek rushed to the bridge with Jake following close behind. The other crew members scattered to their stations, their movements quick and nervous. Jake could feel the fear radiating from them as they prepared for what seemed like an impossible situation. "Show me what we are dealing with," Jake said as they reached the bridge. Neldash brought up the sensor readings on the main display. The approaching ship was much larger than the Velthara, bristling with weapons and armor plating. It looked like it had been built for one purpose only: destroying other vessels and taking what they wanted. "The Vraktar ship carries at least 30 warriors," Lindar reported from his science station. "They are heavily armed and experienced fighters. Our ship has only basic defensive systems and no real weapons." Jake studied the display, his construction worker's mind automatically analyzing the problem like he would approach a difficult building project. "What do they usually do when they board a ship?" "They take everything valuable and either kill the crew or sell them as slaves," Captain Zarthek replied grimly. "The Kethnari are too small and weak to be useful as laborers, so they usually just kill us." "Not today," Jake said with quiet determination. "Tell me about your cargo bay. Is it large enough for me to move around in?" Engineer Telwyn looked confused. "Yes, but why does that matter? You cannot fight 30 armed warriors no matter how strong you are." Jake smiled for the first time since waking up. "Maybe not in a straight fight, but I spent 15 years working construction, and the first thing you learn in that job is how to use your environment to your advantage. Sometimes the best way to handle a heavy load is not to lift it directly, but to use leverage and positioning." Captain Zarthek was not convinced. "Jake, these are not construction materials. These are trained killers with advanced weapons. Even your strength cannot stop plasma bolts." "You are right about that," Jake agreed. "But plasma weapons are not very effective in close quarters, especially if the person you are shooting at knows how to move and use cover. And from what you have told me about the Vraktar, they probably rely on their size and weapons to intimidate their victims. They are not expecting someone who will fight back." The communication system crackled to life with an incoming message. The voice that came through was deep and threatening, speaking in a language the universal translator converted into words they could understand. "Small ship. This is Commander Thakvor of the Vraktar vessel Bone Crusher. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. We claim all your cargo and any biological specimens you may have collected. Resistance will result in the destruction of your ship and the death of your crew." Captain Zarthek looked at Jake, who nodded encouragingly. "Tell them you surrender," Jake said. "Make it sound convincing. Let them think you are just another helpless victim." "Are you certain about this?" Zarthek asked. "Once they board our ship, There will be no going back. I am certain, Jake replied. These are the same creatures who killed my friends and destroyed my ship. They think they can just take whatever they want from peaceful people. It is time someone taught them that bullies do not always win. With trembling hands, Captain Zarthek opened a communication channel. Commander Thakvor, this is Captain Zarthek of the science vessel Velthara. We surrender. Please do not harm my crew. We will comply with all your demands. There was a satisfied growl from the other end of the transmission. Wise choice, little one. Prepare your docking bay for our boarding party. Any attempt to resist or escape will be met with immediate destruction. As the transmission ended, Jake turned to the crew. I need everyone to listen carefully. When the raiders board, you need to act scared but not too scared. Make them think you are helpless, but do not do anything that might make them suspicious. Can you do that? Dr. Velnara spoke up from her station. What about you? Where will you be hiding? In the cargo bay, Jake replied. Telwyn, I need you to show me the layout and tell me what kind of equipment is stored there. I want to know every container, every tool, every piece of machinery that might be useful. The engineer quickly pulled up the cargo bay schematics on his screen. The space was large and filled with various pieces of salvaged equipment, spare parts, and scientific instruments. Jake studied the layout carefully, noting the positions of support beams, heavy containers, and emergency systems. This will work, he said after a few minutes. The space is big enough for me to move around and there is plenty of cover. Telwyn, can you shut off some of the lights in there? I want it darker than usual. Yes, I can make it look like a power malfunction, the engineer replied. But Jake, are you sure about this? The Vraktar are not like us. They are 8 feet tall with thick scales and natural weapons. They have been fighting and killing for their entire lives. Jake nodded grimly. I know, but they have never fought a human before. They do not know what we are capable of when we are protecting people we care about. The next 30 minutes passed quickly as they prepared for the boarding. Jake made his way to the cargo bay and familiarized himself with the space, testing the weight of various objects and planning his movements. The Kethnari equipment was surprisingly well made, and some of the heavier containers would serve his purposes perfectly. Jake, Captain Zarthek's voice came over the communication system. The Vraktar ship is docking now. They are sending 6 warriors aboard. The rest of their crew is staying on their ship. Perfect, Jake replied. 6 is a manageable number. Remember, act scared but not suspicious. Let them think they are in complete control. Jake positioned himself behind a large container near the cargo bay entrance, his heart pounding with anticipation. He could hear heavy footsteps echoing through the ship's corridors as the Vraktar warriors made their way inside. Their voices were loud and arrogant, exactly what he had expected from creatures who were used to easy victories. The first warrior entered the cargo bay, and Jake got his first look at what he was dealing with. The Vraktar was indeed massive, standing over 8 feet tall with thick reptilian scales covering his body. His arms ended in clawed hands and his mouth was filled with sharp teeth. He carried a plasma rifle that looked like it could punch holes through steel. Search everything, the warrior commanded in his harsh voice. The captain wants that biological specimen, and I want to know what other valuable items these weaklings have been collecting. 2 more warriors entered the bay, spreading out to examine the various containers and equipment. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never encountered anything that could threaten them. Their weapons were held casually and they barely bothered to watch for danger. Jake waited until all 3 warriors were well inside the cargo bay before making his move. He had learned patience from years of construction work, where rushing could get you killed by falling debris or malfunctioning equipment. Timing was everything. The first warrior never saw him coming. Jake emerged from behind the container moving faster than anything the Vraktar had ever encountered. His first strike hit the alien in the center of his chest with all the force that 3 years of anger and frustration could provide. The sound of the impact echoed through the cargo bay like a thunderclap. The warrior's thick scales, which had protected him from countless weapons, might as well have been paper. He flew backward into the far wall with enough force to dent the metal plating, and he did not get up. The other 2 warriors spun toward Jake, their weapons rising, but they were too late. He was already moving toward the second warrior, using a heavy container as cover from the plasma bolts that began filling the air. The aliens were fast, but Jake had spent his entire life working in dangerous conditions where split-second reactions meant the difference between life and death. The second warrior managed to get off one shot before Jake reached him. The plasma bolt missed by inches, melting a hole in the container behind Jake's head. Then Jake's construction worker hands closed around the alien's weapon, and with a sharp twist, both the rifle and the warrior's arm snapped like dry wood. The third warrior was backing toward the exit, his weapon trained on Jake when Engineer Telwyn's sabotage of the lighting system activated. The cargo bay plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the emergency lighting that cast strange shadows throughout the space. In the darkness, Jake Morrison was no longer just a construction worker. He was a human being fighting to protect his friends, and 3 years of cryosleep had done nothing to diminish the capabilities that evolution had given his species on a world that demanded strength, speed, and cunning for survival. When the lights came back on 5 minutes later, 3 Vraktar warriors lay unconscious on the cargo bay floor, and Jake was standing over them, breathing hard, but uninjured. "Captain," he said into his communicator, "the cargo bay is secure. How are the others doing up there?" Captain Zarthek's voice came through the communicator with obvious relief and amazement. "Jake, the other 3 warriors just retreated back to their ship. They heard the sounds of fighting from the cargo bay and decided they did not want to investigate. But Commander Thakvor is demanding to know what happened to his boarding party." Jake looked down at the 3 unconscious Vraktar warriors sprawled across the cargo bay floor. They were still breathing, which was more mercy than they had shown to countless other victims over the years. He had deliberately held back his strength, using just enough force to knock them out rather than kill them. "Tell the commander that his warriors are taking a nap," Jake said with grim satisfaction, "and let him know that if he wants them back, he is going to have to come and get them himself." There was a pause before Captain Zarthek responded. "Jake, are you certain that is wise? The commander is even larger and more dangerous than his warriors, and he will be prepared for trouble now." "Good," Jake replied. "I want him to know that this is not going to be an easy victory. Pirates and bullies only understand one thing, and that is strength. It is time we showed them that the Kethnari have friends who are willing to fight for them." Jake made his way back to the bridge, where the crew was gathered around the communication console. Their expressions had changed completely from the fear they had shown earlier. Now they looked at him with something approaching awe, as if they were seeing him for the first time. "Human Jake Morrison," Captain Zarthek said formally, "you have done something that no one in this sector thought was possible. You have defeated Vraktar warriors in single combat." "They were not expecting resistance," Jake replied modestly, "and they made the mistake of splitting up. In a fair fight, it might have been different." Communications Officer Neldash looked up from her station. "Captain Commander Thakvor is demanding an immediate response. He says if we do not release his warriors within the next 10 minutes, he will destroy our ship." Jake considered this. "Can he actually do that? Destroy your ship, I mean?" "Easily," Science Officer Lindar confirmed. "The Bone Crusher has enough firepower to turn the Velthera into scrap metal in seconds. We have no military shields or weapons that could stop them." "Then we need to make sure he does not get the chance to use them," Jake said. "Captain, how many people are still on their ship?" "According to our sensors, about 25 crew members," Neldash reported. "Most of them are support staff and ship technicians, not warriors." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "And Commander Thakvor is the only real threat among them?" "He is their leader and their best fighter," Captain Zarthek confirmed. "But Jake, you cannot be thinking of boarding their ship. That would be suicide, even for someone with your abilities." "Maybe," Jake agreed. "But what choice do we have? If we stay here, they will eventually get tired of waiting and just blow us up. If we try to run, their ship is faster than ours. The only option is to take the fight to them." Dr. Velnara spoke up from her medical station. "Jake, you are not a soldier. You have already done more than anyone could have asked. You do not have to risk your life for us." Jake looked around at the Kethnari crew, these gentle beings who had saved his life and given him a second chance. They had shown him kindness when they could have just left him to die in the wreckage of his ship. Now they were facing death because of their decision to help him. "Yes, I do," he said quietly. "You are my friends now, and humans protect their friends. That is just who we are." The communication system crackled to life again with Commander Thakvor's voice, now filled with rage. "Small ship, your time is running out. Return my warriors immediately or face the consequences. I will not ask again." Captain Zarthek opened the channel. "Commander, we would be happy to return your warriors, but first we need to discuss the terms of their release. Perhaps you would be willing to come aboard and negotiate personally." There was a long pause before the commander responded. When he did, his voice was filled with suspicion. "What happened to my boarding party? Why are they not reporting?" "They encountered some unexpected difficulties," Captain Zarthek replied carefully. "But they are alive and unharmed. We simply believe that a commander of your reputation would prefer to handle such delicate negotiations personally." Jake had to admire the captain's diplomatic skills. He was appealing to the commander's pride while also making it clear that something had gone wrong with the boarding operation. It was exactly the right approach to make the Vraktar leader curious enough to investigate. "Very well, Commander," Thakvor finally said. "I will come aboard your pathetic vessel and see what has caused this delay. But if this is some kind of trick, I will personally feed your crew to the void beasts." "No tricks," Captain Zarthek assured him. "We are simply peaceful traders who wish to resolve this situation without further violence." As the transmission ended, Jake began preparing for what would likely be the most important fight of his life. Commander Thakvor would be bigger, stronger, and more experienced than the warriors Jake had already defeated. He would also be expecting trouble, which meant the element of surprise would be gone. "Where do you want to face him?" Captain Zarthek asked. "The cargo bay again," Jake replied. "I know the layout and there is plenty of room to move around. Plus, seeing his unconscious warriors might make him angry enough to make mistakes." Engineer Telwyn looked worried. "Jake, the commander has been fighting for over 30 years. He has killed hundreds of beings with his bare hands. Are you sure you can defeat him?" Jake considered the question honestly. "I do not know. But I do know that if I do not try, all of you will die. And I would rather die fighting than live knowing. I could have saved my friends but chose not to." 20 minutes later, Commander Thakvor entered the Velthara with 4 of his remaining warriors as bodyguards. He was even more imposing than Jake had expected, standing nearly 9 feet tall with muscles that bulged beneath his thick scales. Scars covered his hide, telling the story of countless battles he had survived. When he saw his 3 warriors lying unconscious in the cargo bay, his eyes blazed with fury. "What happened here?" he demanded. "They met a human," Captain Zarthek replied simply. Commander Thakvor laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "A human? You expect me to believe that one soft-skinned weakling did this to 3 of my best warriors? See? For yourself," Jake said, stepping out from behind a container where he had been waiting. The commander's laughter died as he got his first look at Jake Morrison. Even though Jake was shorter than the Vraktar leader, there was something in his posture and expression that spoke of controlled power and absolute determination. "So," Commander Thakvor said slowly, "you are the biological specimen we detected. I had planned to sell you to a collector, but perhaps it would be more entertaining to kill you myself." "You are welcome to try," Jake replied calmly. "But first, let me tell you something about humans. We do not like bullies. We do not like creatures who prey on the innocent. And we really do not like pirates who think they can take whatever they want from peaceful people." Commander Thakvor drew a massive curved blade from his belt. "Brave words from a dead man. Let me show you why the Vraktar rule this sector of space." The fight that followed was brutal and brief. Commander Thakvor was indeed skilled, experienced, and incredibly strong. But he had never faced anything like Jake Morrison, a human being fighting to protect his friends with 15 years of construction work behind him and 3 years of grief and anger driving him forward. When it was over, Commander Thakvor lay, unconscious next to his warriors, and Jake stood victorious in the cargo bay of a small science vessel. The remaining Vraktar crew, seeing their leader defeated, quickly surrendered and agreed to leave the sector permanently. Dr. Valnara found Jake sitting in the medical bay an hour later, staring out the viewport at the stars. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Tired," Jake replied honestly. "But good. Your friend Kelmore is going to be okay. The pirates are gone, and no one else has to die today. That is about as good as it gets." Captain Zarthek joined them, carrying a datapad with official-looking documents. "Jake, I have been in contact with the Galactic Trade Council. Word of what happened here is already spreading. Other peaceful species want to meet the human who defeated the Vraktar. They are offering you a place as a protector for merchant vessels." Jake considered this. "What about you and your crew? Are you going back to salvage work?" "Actually, Captain," Zarthek said with something that might have been a smile, "we were hoping you might stay with us. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and having a human friend would make our work much safer." Jake looked around at the Kethnari crew, these small, gentle beings who had become his family. "I would like that," he said. "After all, humans are supposed to stick together with their friends." And so Jake Morrison, construction foreman turned galactic protector, began a new life among the stars, proving that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from size or weapons, but from the determination to protect those who cannot protect themselves.